Hello, witnesses of history. Today, we're diving into the life of the man who changed the world forever. When we think of Rome's first emperor, who comes to mind? Julius Caesar? Well, guess what? That's one of the biggest historical misconceptions. Today, we'll unveil the incredible story of his adopted son, Octavian Augustus, the true architect of the Roman Empire. He not only ended a century of civil wars, but also laid the foundations for a civilization that would last for nearly 1,500 years. Get ready to meet the man who, shortly before his death, claimed to have found a Rome of brick and left it a city of marble. Before we dive in, subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss a single episode that uncovers history's most fascinating stories. Augustus, whose original name was Gaius Octavius Thurinus, was never crowned as emperor or king, titles that were widely disliked in ancient Rome. Instead, he chose the title of Princeps Civitatis, which would translate to first citizen or the first among citizens. But his powers and authority were closer to those of a monarch. The title Augustus was granted to him by the Senate in 27 BC, a religious title meaning venerable or honored, derived from the Latin word augura, which means to increase. This name, along with Caesar, would become permanent titles for future Roman rulers for 14 centuries. Throughout this video, we'll explore how a seemingly unassuming young man became the central figure of Roman politics, using space, urban planning, and the archaeology of power to legitimize his rule. Augustus's life began in 63 BC in a family that, while of the minor nobility or the equestrian order, had not yet reached the Republic's highest magistracy. His great-grandfather was a military tribune, his grandfather held various local public offices, and his father became governor of Macedonia. But Octavian's life took a dramatic turn in 44 BC when, as a young man of just 19, Julius Caesar, his great-uncle, named him his adopted son and principal heir before being assassinated. Imagine the shock this must have caused. This act granted Octavian not only the prestigious surname of Caesar, but also the loyalty of his legions. Octavian, showing extraordinary cunning and intelligence for his age, decided to assume his role as his great-uncle's political heir. He seized a portion of the funds that had been allocated to Caesar for a war against the Parthian Empire, amounting to 700 million sesterces and stored in Brindisi. With this money and with Julius Caesar's veteran legionaries, he quickly began to strengthen his personal forces. During this era, to finance the troops, savage prescriptions were put in place, where about 150 senators and 2,000 equestrians were declared outlaws and deprived of their properties, which then became the assets of the triumvirs. Along with Mark Antony and Marcus Aemilius Lepidus, he formed the Second Triumvirate in 43 BC, a pact whose powers were officially sanctioned by the Senate. A year later, the Senate, influenced by Octavian, posthumously recognized Julius Caesar as a divinity, the Divus Iulius. This allowed Octavian to promote himself as the Divi Filius, the son of the god, which gave him a considerable political advantage within the triumvirate. The path to absolute power was not without difficulties or rivals. Octavian first had to confront Sextus Pompey, son of Pompey the Great, who controlled a very powerful fleet and had disrupted grain shipments to the Italian peninsula. earning him the unofficial nickname Neptuni Filius, the son of Neptune. Octavian was forced to negotiate to avoid a famine in Rome. But ultimately, Sextus Pompey's fleet was almost completely destroyed by General Agrippa, and Sextus was captured and executed in Asia Minor. Then it was Lepidus's turn. After the victory over Pompey, Lepidus tried to claim Sicily for himself, but his own troops abandoned him and defected to Octavian. Attracted by the promise of cash, Lepidus surrendered and was expelled from the triumvirate, although he was allowed to keep the position of Pontifex Maximus, the director of the College of Priests. But the biggest challenge would come from Mark Antony, Julius Caesar's lieutenant and, at first, the true strongman of Rome. The relationship between Octavian and Antony deteriorated drastically due to Antony's alliance with Queen Cleopatra in Egypt. Octavian skillfully used this orientalization of Antony in his propaganda, accusing him of having repudiated his own wife, Octavia, Octavian's sister, for an Egyptian lover, and of having become an Eastern despot. The rift between them widened, and the tension culminated with the famous revelation of Antony's secret will, which Octavian seized from the temple of the Vestal Virgins. In this will, Antony supposedly designated Alexandria as his final resting place and gave territories conquered by the Romans as kingdoms for his children with Cleopatra to rule. This was unforgivable for the Romans. The final confrontation, the famous Battle of Actium, came on September 2nd, 31 years before Christ. A decisive turning point that marked the end of the Roman Republic. Octavian's fleets, skillfully commanded by his best general, Marcus Vipsanius Agrippa, faced the combined forces of Mark Antony and Cleopatra in the Gulf of Ambracia in Greece. The Octavian victory was decisive. Antony and Cleopatra managed to flee to Egypt, but Octavian pursued them relentlessly, finally defeating them in Alexandria on August 1st, 30 years before Christ. Faced with the humiliation of capture, both chose suicide. Antony fell on his own sword, and Cleopatra, according to tradition, died from the bite of an asp or from poisoning. Octavian left no loose ends, even ordering the execution of Caesarion, the son of Julius Caesar and Cleopatra. The death of his rivals left Octavian as the undisputed master of Rome and the Roman world. The annexation of Egypt to the Roman people's rule was a key achievement, as it gave Rome total control of the Mediterranean and its vast riches. Back in Rome, in 29 before Christ, Octavian officially proclaimed the end of the civil wars. And, with a clever public relations move, he handed all his powers back to the Senate, giving the impression of restoring the Republic. This masterful move earned him the honorary title of Father of the Fatherland. But was it a true restoration or the beginning of a new form of government? The answer is key to understanding the empire. The year 27 before Christ marked a before and after. The Senate granted Octavian the title of Augustus, a name that implied a venerable, sacred, and religious authority, which was a fundamental step in the consolidation of his power. From then on, Augustus initiated a series of political reforms that, while maintaining a republican facade, centralized power in his person, inaugurating what would become known as the Principate. The Princeps maintained firm control over the Senate, reducing its size and making senators' careers directly dependent on his favor. He maintained the loyalty of a professionalized army, which grew to 28 legions, and the Praetorian Guard, an elite body created in 27 before Christ that, while serving as his personal bodyguard, eventually became a force of great political influence within Rome. Augustus accumulated several key powers. The Imperium Proconsulare Maius, which gave him command over the legions and the imperial provinces, the lifelong Tribunicia Potestas, which allowed him to veto Senate decisions and protect the plebeians, and the position of Pontifex Maximus, which made him the supreme religious leader, allying his authority with the protective halo of the gods. These positions, though seemingly individual and renewable, gave him an unrivaled auctoritas moral authority, which was the true basis of his power beyond formal titles. His mastery of disguising monarchy under a cloak of republicanism was one of his greatest political strokes of genius. Oh, restoration, that was actually a profound transformation. The Pax Romana, also known as the Pax Augustea, is perhaps Augustus's most famous and lasting legacy. After a century of civil wars and instability, the empire experienced unprecedented relative peace and stability, both internally and across its vast borders that stretched over 3 continents. This was made possible by a profound military reform. Augustus established a permanent, professional army of approximately 28 legions, with compulsory military service of 16 to 20 years and rewards upon discharge, such as Roman citizenship for auxiliaries. This army, where everyone swore loyalty to the princeps and from whom they received their pay and promotions, consolidated his power. But he didn't just reform the army. Augustus was proud to have found a Rome of brick and left it a city of marble. He undertook a vast urban program that transformed the urbs, beautifying and monumentalizing public spaces. He built numerous monuments, including the Temple of Mars Altar in his Forum of Augustus, the Baths of Agrippa, and his own mausoleum. He also encouraged other projects like the Theater of Marcellus. Additionally, he created the Vigiles Corps, which functioned as firefighters and urban police, and established an imperial messaging system called the Cursus Publicus that would be maintained for centuries, dramatically improving the empire's infrastructure and security. These works not only beautified Rome but projected his power into every corner of the empire, demonstrating his vision of a superior Roman civilization destined to rule the world. Augustus saw himself as a savior of traditional Roman values, seeking to restore the monogamy, chastity, and piety he believed were lost during the civil wars. His laws, such as the famous Lex Aelia de Maritandis or Dinibus 18 before Christ, sought to encourage marriage and procreation, penalizing celibacy and those without children. Although these laws generated controversy and were not always as successful as he wished among the aristocracy, they reveal his attempt to influence private life to strengthen the state and his vision of a strong military and senatorial aristocracy. Propaganda was a key tool of his government. Augustus surrounded himself with the most famous poets of his time, such as Virgil and Horace, who exalted his figure and the new era of peace and prosperity. Through largesse, large donations to the people such as 400 sesterces to 250,000 citizens, and the celebration of games and spectacles, like the Ludi Seculares he re-established in 17 before Christ. He won popular support, proving to be the great benefactor of Rome and the initiator of a golden age. His image was projected on coins, sculptures, like the famous one from Prima Porta, and on the Arapaces, the Altar of Peace. But perhaps his greatest act of self-promotion was the writing of the Residential Gesti Divi Augusti, the deeds of the divine Augustus, written towards the end of his life around 3 before Christ. This autobiographical document was a political testament, a catalogue of imperial skills that outlined his model of government and his achievements. Augustus left instructions for it to be inscribed on bronze plaques in front of his mausoleum and copied and distributed throughout the empire. This document was a justification for the emergence of a new political era. In 2 BC, he was acclaimed as Pater Patriae, Father of the Fatherland, the title he most valued and which consolidated his image as the benchmark and protector of all Romans. Despite his immense power and achievements, Augustus's reign was not without challenges and failures. He suffered a great military setback in Germania. Beyond his borders, in 9 after Christ, 3 entire legions, led by Publius Quinctilius Varus, were annihilated by the forces of Arminius in the Battle of the Teutoburg Forest. This catastrophic defeat, the largest suffered by Rome since Carrhae, deeply impacted Augustus, who for months would bang his head against the walls shouting, "Quinctilius Varus, give me back my legions." Although his stepson Tiberius and Germanicus tried to avenge the defeat, Teutoburg marked the end of Roman expansion in Germany, fixing the Rhine River as the empire's border for 400 years. The problem of succession was another major personal and political challenge for Augustus. He needed to designate an heir without arousing senators' fears of a monarchy. His first candidates, his son-in-law Marcellus, his sister's son, and his grandsons Gaius and Lucius Caesar, sons of his daughter Julia the Elder and Agrippa, died prematurely. This cleared the way for Tiberius, his stepson, the son of his wife Livia, whom he progressively favored. Augustus officially adopted Tiberius in 4 after Christ on the condition that he, in turn, adopt his nephew Germanicus. He granted him the powers of tribune and proconsul, making them co-govern for several years. Livia's influence in this succession is a subject of historical debate, with some rumors suggesting she even poisoned Augustus with figs to ensure her son's ascent, although this is generally considered propaganda of the era. Augustus died on August 19, 14 after Christ, in Nola, Campania, at the age of 75, the same place where his father had died when he was 4. His last private words to his inner circle were, "Have I played my part well? Then applaud as I exit." But his public words, which resonate to this day, were, "I found Rome a city of brick and left it a city of marble." His funeral was a massive event that paralyzed Rome, and his body was cremated and placed in his mausoleum, the Mausoleum of Augustus, one of the first great buildings he completed, which served as the final resting place for many of his relatives and close associates. He was declared a god, the highest honor for a Roman leader, and his imperial cult spread throughout the empire. Even the month of Sextilis was renamed August in his honor, just as the month of July was named for Julius Caesar. Augustus's legacy is immense and immeasurable. He laid the foundations of an empire that, in one way or another, would last for nearly 1,500 years, until the final twilight of the Eastern Roman Empire in 1453. His military, political, social, and urban reforms shaped the ancient world. His titles of Caesar and Augustus became permanent appellations for future emperors and synonyms for power in many modern languages, such as Kaiser in German or Tsar in Russian. From the neoclassical architecture we see all over the Western world to the Spanish language, which would not exist without the Latin of Rome, his influence endures to this day. Augustus was not just the first emperor of Rome. He was the one who, with cunning and determination, forged the Roman Empire as we remember it. His legacy was the peace and prosperity, the celebrated Pax Romana, that the empire enjoyed for 2 centuries. And that concludes our look at Octavian Augustus, the man who went from a young revolutionary to a divine emperor. If you liked the video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more fascinating journeys through history. See you next time.